What's going on, Iron Culture? This is Eric Helms. I just want to take a brief second before we jump into today's monster episode to let you know that we are having the New Zealand Powerlifting Conference, which is going on June 1st. That's local time in New Zealand. So that would actually be the 31st if you are not on this side of the world. And this is going to be a conference where not only myself, but also one of the most sought-after nutritionists in powerlifting, Kedrick Kwan, who's doing his PhD with me here at Auckland, New Zealand, and is working with many of the highest-level powerlifters in the IPF, will be presenting, as well as Jason Tremblay, the founder of the Strength Guys and the well-known coach of Taylor Atwood, Leah Bavois, and many others. We're presenting alongside the world champion and junior world champion and inaugural Sheffield champion, Evie Corrigan, who's not only an athlete, but also a coach and president of the Auckland Powerlifting Association, and also a number of my PhD students, as well as my sports scientist colleagues, like Dr. Alyssa Joy Spence and PhD candidates Christian Amdi, as well as Andrew King, who are specifically doing their PhD on powerlifting, and also our coaches in powerlifting. Christian's actually part of the Danish powerlifting national team as a coach, as well as Andrew being part of Reformance, coaching alongside Kedrick Kwan and many others. We're having a whole day presenting on the nutrition, training, injury prevention, mentality, mindset, the whole nine yards as it relates to elite level powerlifting with an athlete panel. And we're having people come. And the best part of this, folks, is it's not putting money in my coffers. This isn't part of the big Helms industry. This is actually having all of our proceeds go to the New Zealand powerlifting team. We're going to go be competing in Lithuania shortly after this conference in June. So you can not only attend in person, but like I said, this is the day prior if you're in another part of the world. The reason I brought that up is because we have a live stream and you can also get the recording. So please check it out. The link is in the show notes and you can get all of that awesome content. If you can't watch it live, if you can't be there in person, you can absolutely watch the recording. And just remember that you're helping us fund in an underfunded sport all the coaches and athletes representing New Zealand going to Worlds, our fellow lifters. And I greatly appreciate you taking the time to listen. Enjoy today's episode.
Eric's.
Omar.
Guys, you put out a monster episode last week or the week before. Honestly, when it comes to our posting schedule, who can say? But that
could have been both.
It could have been both, Trex. The episode, I would say 274, do hard gainers need more volume? I'm calling that probably, I think we're almost, at a halfway point of the year. So let's say 26 episodes. It's a top 10 for the year. So I highly advise everyone to check out that episode. But is it okay, guys, before we get to the episode today, which is a kind of deep dive into the Erics, plural, we addressed a little bit of controversy before. It's all super positive. I said I thought that episode was fantastic. Definitely top 10 for the year. Everyone should check it out, even if you're not a hard gainer. Just the way that you explain everything, I think both of you did a fantastic job. There's a bit of controversy. Can we just deal with that? Like I know, this is what the shock jocks are known for. This is what people really come from. They want to hear the good gossip about the industry. Can I do that for a second?
Floor is yours.
Trex put his hat on. Okay, shit's getting serious. Over the top. Confirmed. Wait, Trex, have you watched this? Sly Stallone arm wrestling classic film, Over the Top?
Is that the one where the person's arm snaps in half?
Yes.
During an arm wrestling?
Yes.
I've only seen that little portion.
Okay, this actually might be more monumental than what I'm about to say because we just gave at Iron Culture an actual pop culture reference that Trexler knows. He's learning. Okay, we thought all that space was used for academia, for exercise science knowledge, and when they're uploading all the information to Trex's brain, there's no space for pop culture. Ish don't think so.
What I'm doing is I'm syncing up with some of the large language models, and my training data has the entire I just don't have anything within the last 18 months now since the last update.
Nice.
Stallone stuff is all good.
Yeah, fantastic. So I did say Eric did a great job, but really people let both of you know what they thought, and someone said Eric really redeemed himself with this episode, and I personally thought that in particular, Eric, you did a great job. You did a great job. Eric, on the other hand,
I agree.
Eric, on the other hand, can't really say because someone else said, I've always found Eric to be exceptionally intelligent, kind, humorous, empathetic, aesthetic, diligent, fair, patient, compassionate, etc. The other Eric, though. So it seems like I said the episode as a whole, very well received, information-packed, great flow, chemistry off the charts. That's my personal opinion, and I think that's what other people saw. But these are some of the top comments, and I don't know how to really interpret them. Both men agreeing to keep their head and facial hair opposite really sets the tone going in. So they know kind of the difference, right? How to identify. And that's why for this episode, I put not Eric, just so I'm not confused as being one of the other Erics and we could differentiate the three hosts. But then another person said, and then I want the reaction, man, that one Eric really killed it. The main Eric was a letdown, though. Oh no, wow. Okay, there's a lot of comments on this one. Sorry, the final one, we got our 10 minutes of, obligatory banter here. There's actually 40 comments, okay? I'm only going to read one more, however. Finally, Eric stepped up and gave us a good performance for once. Keep up the good work, Eric. Now, Eric, as always, you did amazingly. What are both of your responses? You could go at the same time, you could choose to be an individual, whatever you want.
No, I think our audience is smart. These are smart folks, some of the best folks, and they call balls and strikes. They call it how they see it, and I co-sign on all of the comments. I think I appreciate it, and I think that their honesty is going to help make the show better.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'll agree with that. I think it's really important to, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, and I appreciate the recognition for it. And I think people only get better when our audience is honest with them, and I do appreciate everyone's honesty. I know it'll result in a better product. But also I appreciate the continued faith and respect for me. So yeah.
And I'll just say in conclusion, because we do have this monster episode to get right into, that I feel that sometimes you need these truthful, hard-hitting conversations, and we didn't want to single anyone out, but they knew who they were. And so sometimes you might think, oh, Eric, which one are we talking about? But I think everyone listening to this episode is aware of exactly who was being referenced every single time the name Eric was being dropped. And it was perfectly, illustrated by both of what you said. And that's interesting now that we can move past that as collectively the Erics and the not Eric into this episode about the Erics. And that is now, wow, it'd be probably 4 or 5 episodes ago, Trex. And I'm only saying Trex instead of Eric. Trex would have known if I said Eric, it was him. But just to differentiate a little bit, spice up the relationship. It was about 4 episodes ago where you were detailing, we're talking more Trex-lore, but really it was also your journey as a lifter, but then also your journey as an educator, the two kind of happening at the same time in parallel, different things that you've learned. But then at the very end, I found it fascinating. We actually ran out of time where you talked about how you were getting a little bit more interested in research pertaining to psychology, like maybe motivational literature, like yourself, your own journey, what's been going on, how you found yourself developing more empathy for different people or different lifters at various stages of their journey. And so you kind of went a bit into what happened over the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, a lot of people didn't know that, man, where, you had the squad record for a minute before that John Downing, who I do know John Downing, and he's a monster squatter, took it.
Well, I had it for literally thousands of minutes.
And for certain species, that's an entire lifetime. So like really, you could say that you've had it for eons in certain species' lives.
Generations of mosquitoes know that you are the squat record holder.
Yep.
And so I like how you started on that journey and everything that you did, and then you're kind of reflecting back. And I found that very interesting, kind of as a science educator, exercise science educator, the way that you view your own lifting journey, what actually interests you around these times, and what really you want to communicate to other people. And so maybe we could jump off from that, and then Helms, you've done a really good job, man. Last year in particular, like you had your season turned pro natural bodybuilder, where how things have changed over time for you, the evolution really of yourself. But I kind of liked Trex, and I think that's one of the things that both of you do a good job, is just how candid you were in terms of sort of what's going on, the way that you see things, the ever-evolving relationship. I think as a quick side note, and then I really want to begin. I think it's all too common to believe as either an educator, an influencer, doesn't really matter, an active participant in the fitness space, that if you're not seen as being 100% in love with a thing, that either you're disingenuous, you're not about it. Why should I take your opinion seriously? Because I'm bleeding for this, right? I'm all about this. And that's not to say there's been any, Trex, with you, your relationship with lifting, any love lost, but I just like how truthful it was. Because it's been my personal observation, and then please, I want you to talk, and then Helms chime in, that some of the people that sort of parrot some of those things that I just said, or they position themselves in that way where lifting is their core identity, their sole identity, oftentimes we'll find them burn out. And that's not the conversation we're having right now, but there's a lot of judgment placed upon how one views their own fitness journey and where fitness is in relation to other aspects of their life. So I thought it was just fantastic, man. I wanted to kind of recap it because it was at the end of the episode. Please, Trex, we want to hear from you.
Well, there's certainly a lot to reflect on there. I guess I'll give the kind of Cliff Notes summary, and then we can kind of dive into some more details and little tributaries that stem off from it. But yeah, I started lifting. I didn't just start lifting. I started being extremely passionate about lifting when I was 12 years old. And so what that means is if you start when you're 12 and you don't have terrible genetics, you have a head start on everybody, right? I mean, you basically are the most jacked kid in 7th grade. And then you're the most jacked kid in 8th grade. And if you have actually kind of decent genetics, then you'll probably continue to be the most jacked person in, your grade and your little tiny pond you live in, big fish in a little pond, until you go off to college, where all of a sudden there's 60,000 people there and you say, okay, maybe I'm not the most jacked person. But all of that is to say, from the age of 12 to about, oh man, I'd have to crunch numbers, 26 or 27, was generally seen by myself and by others as above average in terms of fitness. And the interesting thing about being someone, in our neck of the woods for fitness, someone could be an excellent rock climber, and you look at them and maybe you don't know, right? Someone could be an excellent runner, and maybe you just think, oh, that person's pretty thin, right? But when you're bodybuilder, powerlifter, you wear that. It's not just how you see yourself; it's how other people see you. So it basically, that was kind of how I existed from 12 to 26 or 27. Built all of my academic trajectory around it. Built my career around it. Most of my friendships were, stemmed off from various athletic endeavors. And then I started running into some injury issues. Really, they started right around the time I was, prepping for my pro card and my pro debut that same year in bodybuilding. Had some, minor issues, not a huge deal, but, figured, I've had a million of these. I'm sure I'll get better, right? Unfortunately, normally it's like, oh, I got my shoulder's bugging me. And then 2 weeks later, who cares, right? Had my fair share of back problems, but they all got better. In this case, it's actually a nerve issue. It's a nerve entrapment, and it is not fun. Very, very painful, both in and out of the gym. And it's not the type of thing that you can just train through it, because it's nerve pain where it's that deep burning that's just different. And it really kind of stops you in your tracks. And then the nerve that's entrapped right now is a mixed nerve. So there's motor and sensory information traveling along that nerve. And so then there's actual muscle spasms where it's even if you were just a legitimate, if your brain was just wired where the pain didn't bother you at all, it's still not going to help you with the fact that you're having active muscle spasms when you're trying to train, right? So all of that is to say, it's been a really challenging, I think it's been going on, I probably messed up the age ranges and all that stuff, but this has been going on at least for I think it started in 2017. So yeah, it's been 7 years, and I've tried to train more. I've tried to train less. I've tried to train differently. I've tried various elements of physical therapy, and I've gotten about every diagnosis that could possibly fall under the umbrella of what my symptoms entail. So it's been a really frustrating 7 years of kind of interacting with folks in the healthcare system who are doing their best, but ultimately still kind of getting the runaround of going from specialist to specialist, and people are just like, I don't know, maybe if you wait an 8th year, maybe then you'll be in good shape. So anyway, yeah, my fitness has obviously been on the back burner, and you know, one of the things we talked about is, well, what do you do with that for someone who's a fitness professional, coach, athlete, academic, everything is kind of in this fitness space. So yeah, it's really shifted kind of how I see myself, how I see my role in the industry, how I see my role outside of the industry, and how I kind of view my trajectory as a person who engages in exercise. So it's been something that's caused a lot of growth, a lot of change. I do think it's made me I think it's equipped me with much more, a great number of soft skills that will translate well to coaching once I'm ready to do a lot more of coaching. Like I pretty much scaled down my coaching to functionally 0 when I had some other projects going. So once I dip my toes back into coaching, I know I'll be better for it. And so, yeah, it's been an interesting thing. And now I'm back in the healthcare system again. And I promised my wife I'm going to keep showing up until something's different. So yeah, we're talking about maybe we're going to give it one last hurrah with physical therapy. Then we're talking about maybe doing a nerve block procedure, which it makes me a little nervous. I don't like to mess around with nerves, but what are you going to do? And that's pretty much where we're at. So yeah, where do you want to go from there?
Trex, there's so much. I'm going to kick it over to Helms because I do want all of us to have a conversation here. I just want to highlight how interesting and important I find it for both of you because Helms, I'm sure you're going to mention about like your neck. With Trexler, both of you are very smart individuals that are aware of like, okay, how do I test for this? Who do I see? What are the likely paths that I can follow? How would I potentially rectify this? Exactly as you said, Trex, for yourself, where you said, you know, normally some of these things resolve. So you kind of followed the normal courses of an action that one should in order to get a desired result. And then we're seeing how you're navigating this path, and you have more resources, more knowledge, certainly than the average person. And this is like, we talk about sort of the graveyard of hidden bodies for any, you know, chosen path. So like the lifters that, you know, aspire to accomplish ABC or lift for a certain amount of time, and then, you know, something like that might occur. They stop lifting because they get demotivated. They're no longer in our ecosystem, and we never hear about them because guess what? They're not giving that input. But I can't stress enough how not your exact story, but components of that, if you've been lifting for a long time, not that lifting injures you. I'm not saying that whatsoever, but it's a function kind of time and certainly many other things and just the random probability of participating in anything, that it happens. And it's just, I feel in some ways, not to scare anyone, some of these journeys aren't discussed enough. So I'll put a pin on that for now. I want to hear from Helms, and then Trex, we'll get right back to you.
Yeah, I was reflecting as you were talking, Trex, on how we're similar in so many ways, but different in a lot of important ways. I didn't start lifting until I was 21, and I had a relatively well-established sense of self. And when you look at me from the outside, you think, man, like Eric is just like everything is orbiting the fact that he's a lifter. And that's true. But I was thinking about how there's so many facets to that in my life, to where I get to mentor students, I get to communicate science related to lifting, I get to compete in different types of lifting events. I have different ways that I can express myself just as an athlete, and how I also have the ability to coach people, mentor students, produce science, write, communicate it. I'm interested in the history of it. So I think one of the things that I am not worried about is it would be tragic if I couldn't lift, but I don't think I would lose my sense of self, because that's a little more connected to my values, and I express those values and I have the ability to kind of tap into all elements of self-determination theory, you know, relatedness, autonomy, competence through multiple pathways that are all connected to lifting. So it's interesting. And I was thinking, like, I have gone to the brink and the edge of a similar situation to you, of injury causing some pretty substantial disruptions of the thing that I love the most, and it's at the core of all that. But I haven't been in a position where I was intractable. You know, I've had to face the possibility of this is going to close a door for me and what I can do. But ultimately, the door stayed open due to some combination of natural healing, fortune, luck, and having enough disposable income to get surgery, you know, on my hips.
And supplements.
Yes. And that was the big one. The fact that I was able to take whatever supplement you're thinking that
we'll get the link up
problems.
next week.
Yeah,
that's right.
We're still negotiating behind the scenes. Hold on, guys.
That's right. Yes. Wait, I've always talked shit about BCA, but they actually do fix FAI. Who knew?
Wow.
So yeah, like I've had numerous injuries throughout my lifting career, but I don't think I don't think any more than your typical person who's been a competitive lifter for that long. Most of them minor, even though they were relatively drastic at the time. Like the first major injury I got was my first 2 years of lifting, and I was doing conventional deadlifts from a deficit, and I just had basically lingering back pain for like 3 years, from 2007 to 2010, that only really resolved when I switched to sumo, and then lo and behold, I found that I was stronger, stuck with it, and I kind of just gave myself the space and time for my back to recover. And then in 2009, I tore my hamstring, but it ended up not being nearly as bad as I thought it was. It was non-operative. It scarred down, healed up, and you know, it was like, you know, a muscle injury, which in bodybuilders and powerlifters tend to recover pretty quick. And I was, you know, I had a couple days where I was on crutches, and I was like, shit, this is going to change everything. I'm going to have to cut off my season. I'm not going to be able to power lift. And it just ended up not being true, which was, I was very fortunate for. From there, you know, the 2011, I started to get the first hints of my FAI changing my depth. And I think that was the first time I probably damaged my labrum squatting, as I felt it, noticed it, it healed, it went away, and then I came back with less range. And that got progressively worse until it came to a head in 2013, when I had been powerlifting and Olympic lifting simultaneously. And from 2013 till I actually finally pulled the trigger and got surgery in 2017, I couldn't squat without pain to depth, but I was still competing in Olympic lifting and powerlifting, and I just worked around it. But I was not able to improve my squat. I was stuck right below a 500-pound squat for those 4 years, and then I got surgery, and that finally fixed it. But it did require me to go under the knife and get bilateral FAI surgery and not know whether it was going to be successful, reading the research saying, you know, it's slightly more likely to be effective than just a regression to the mean. But I'm like, you know, I tried to regress to the mean and heal myself for 4 years, and I was in the same position as you are now, Trex, of like, you know what? It ain't going to be no worse. You know, go in there, dig around, and I'll heal. And if it doesn't fix it, then I'm in the same position I was. But I know that doing nothing is, based upon 4 years of data and 7 years in your case, is not fixing the problem. And I tried everything too. So it ended up being a very good decision for me. I really do hope it's a good decision for you. And I think, like I said, I had to go up to the brink, but I still had so many other outlets, and I could still train. I think, unfortunately, your situation is that training differently, training less, training more, training for different things, running, lifting, it ends up being a very pervasive issue, while mine was a very localized joint problem. And the other time I went to the brink, as we've talked about in Iron Culture before, was the neck injury that kind of came out of nowhere, where I thought I would basically just be stuck with bodybuilding and potentially having a pretty significant asymmetry if I couldn't deal with it. And I was weeks out from getting neck surgery when it resolved itself. And that fortunately hasn't cropped back up in the last 6 years. But I am decided that I'm done with Olympic weightlifting, even though that wasn't the cause of it. I'm just, you know, not really built for it, and it is what it is. So it's, I don't envy your position, but I also saw how much personal growth I got out of just being to the brink of the canyon that you fell down and then crawled out of stronger for it. And I think, yeah, like there was personal growth that came just from that. So anyway, just to kind of juxtapose it, I think it's interesting. And I do wonder if there are pros and cons to lifting when you start at 12, where it almost seems like it becomes baked into your identity. So that when you step away, there's more growth and more rebuilding that ultimately is a positive that you would have to do than I would, being, the inverse of those numbers, 21 when I started lifting, not 12, to where I had some degree of solidity. I guess I had a good idea of who I was when I was 21. Obviously, it did change, and I have grown since I'm 21, but I knew my worth and I had my values in place. And I didn't lift because of something lacking in my life. I lifted as a way to express those things that were who I was, and that just kind of made it more rich. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just think it's interesting how, because from the outside, people can look at us and go, yeah, strength athlete, bodybuilder, academic, podcaster, science communicator, same first name. Like they've got to be very, very similar in many ways. But I think we're pretty fundamentally different people. And I think that's kind of a cool thing, because I love to see lifting build people in different ways. And I've always get to benefit from hearing about your journey, because it informs mine as well, and different ways to think about it.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is I don't have any values. So when you were able to lean back on yours,
you're an amoeba, Trex. You're an amoeba.
I was really stuck. Yeah, values are a completely foreign concept to me. I think the fact that I got into lifting when I was 12, and it was always kind of the central focus of what I like to do. I think I missed out on, maybe some opportunities to diversify my interests and in some ways kind of how I saw myself. But I will say the fact that all this stuff started happening after I had gotten into science communication and after I had gotten into research, I think that really helped steady the ship. I never felt like I was completely unmoored and had no idea who I was. I think the way I saw it was, basically, okay, I engage with fitness in a variety of different ways. One of these ways is going to have to go big time on the back burner. And that's literally being in the gym, training the way I like to train. And while it has been frustrating, because Omar, you had mentioned previously the idea of, maybe losing passion for training. It's not that I've lost, and this is something I've had to really wrestle with. This is kind of what got me into the psychology research and trying to do some soul searching, which was a very growth stimulating process. But I was like, man, do I not like training anymore? And eventually I kind of looked into it and I was like, well, no, I still love training. I just can't train the way I like to train. And I've never liked the way that I'm training now. Like this has never been, I've never gravitated toward the type of training that I can do without substantial discomfort right now. So that was one of those things where I kind of had I had to like look in the mirror and be like, is it possible that you've lost your passion for this stuff? And the answer is like, no, you're just forced to do stuff that you never, ever, ever enjoyed or had a passion for out of necessity now. So, I think, the fact that I was able to kind of lean in more to coaching people, creating content, doing research related to fitness, I think that gave me a really nice kind of cushion or kind of safety net to fall back on, where I might have otherwise had quite the identity crisis on my hands. So that was good. And I do think one of the other things that helps is that, by the time this stuff all started getting pretty rough, I had already, I already felt like I had covered a lot of ground in terms of my own fitness. Like I had tried to get tried to beef up and be a powerlifter, did that for a while and was really happy with how it went. And then, tried to take my bodybuilding to a higher level and was fortunate to do that. And wasn't a world champion, but felt good about what I'd accomplished in bodybuilding, And so I think the fact that I have pushed to levels that I feel really good about, and I have other outlets for expressing my passion for fitness through research and science communication and coaching, I think it's put me in a position where I feel really comfortable saying, yeah, my personal fitness level, not good right now. You know, it's kind of on the back burner. We'll pick that up once we've successfully navigated this injury. But I have these other ways to interact with fitness in a meaningful way, things that really bring me a lot of fulfillment and joy. And I also, because of my past experiences, have a lot of confidence that once I find a way through or around what I'm currently navigating, I don't believe that I'm going to have major difficulties getting back to where I was. Because, I mean, as much as I act like I'm 75 years old, I mean, I just turned 33. Like, I expect this thing to be in my rearview mirror within the next year and a half, 2 years. I mean, I know plenty of folks who are jacked at 55, right? Like, there could be an entire second half of this whole fitness journey for me on the other side of this. So that's when, you know, people will ask me if I plan to compete again in this or compete again in that. And like, dude, I have no idea. So for me, it's just kind of focusing on the immediate of engaging in fitness the ways that I can right now, getting better, and then we'll figure out what kind of constraints there are at that point. But yeah, it's been an interesting process. And Helms, I think I basically had to rediscover my sense of self to some extent at the age that was probably about 10 years too late.
You know, you say that, but at the same time, it seems almost, and maybe it took a lot more to get to it than that what you just said there indicates to me. But what seems to me is like, I know many people in your position who wouldn't necessarily have the confidence that it's going to be fine and I got this. You know, like I think a lot of people would be in your position unable to train the way they want, and doing, especially from a young age, it being a core part of who they are. 7 years away, losing their fitness, they might be at risk of losing more, like a sense of self-efficacy, a belief that this will be okay when I come back. And in my time as a personal trainer, I met many people who were, let's say, athletes in high school and college. I think this is probably far more common. And they sustain an injury where they can no longer play that sport. And maybe that's the difference, is you're like, well, you know, whatever I want to do in fitness, I can do it. But if it's tightly connected to like American football, you know, and you know that in the States, there's no really, I mean, you can play like the local semi-pro team or whatever, but I've met a lot of people who like lose a gear after that happens. And it, to me, doesn't seem like that is the case for you, because you're like, you know, I'm an accomplished academic. I'm really good in my field. I'm a capable person. It seems like you have a very solid sense of self as far as your capability to come back and do something and put your all to it and be successful. And I do wonder, was that something that you had to cultivate? Was there a time period where you were like, I don't know if I'm going to come back from this. I do feel like I've lost a gear and I don't know if I can get it. Because there's a difference between, can I overcome this injury versus, do I have hope that I will be, like, if I do, will I then be successful afterwards? You know, I think that's a really interesting perspective. And it sounds to me like you're very confident without necessarily having like a really concrete, you know, like, yeah, I have this thing and this medication or this surgery will fix it. You're like, you know, I know I'm going to figure this out. And when I do, I'm going to be a badass again. And I think that's a really positive character trait.
Yeah. I was smiling because it's not necessarily that I have confidence in any particular outcome. I think it's that I don't make the mistake of convincing myself that it's all about me and my fitness, right? Like I don't view the stakes as being high. I feel like I can contextualize it as being something that is a fun hobby to engage with, rather than kind of like a life or death, like, will I get back to it or not? And I think that I've become very comfortable with all possible outcomes. So like, I think the reason that I feel a sense of self-efficacy and confidence is because I'm not married or attached to any particular outcome. So like, if you were to ask me, well, what does success look like on the other end of this? It could be comfortably being able to run again. It could be saying, screw it, I'm going to do a nerve block and then maybe just like bench press 400 pounds and bench press is all I do, right? It could take any number of different manifestations. And I don't know enough about my future abilities and constraints to have any opinion about what that's going to look like. But I do have confidence that I'll, pursue treatment. Most likely we'll be able to figure something out. After that, we'll figure out what the situation is, keep moving forward, do something useful with my time, and engage with fitness in a way that brings me some level of enjoyment and hopefully is beneficial to my health, So it's not that I'm super confident that I will achieve any particular outcome or get back to the most muscular I was in the past. It's that I am, without having a sense of hopelessness or despair, I'm just simply not attached to any particular outcome. Like I'll do my best and it'll be fine. And people have dealt with a lot worse. So, what are you going to do? You keep moving.
That's actually reminds me, Omar, a lot of our conversation we had with Mike T, where an important piece to him dealing with that injury and an important piece for me of dealing with my injuries and not letting it become fatalistic or anxiety, promoting and losing sleep over it, was not catastrophizing. And then taking an honest look, it's okay, what would my life be like if I couldn't do X, Y, and Z? And then ultimately getting to, and it probably doesn't happen overnight, but ultimately getting to, that would be okay. I'd find a way forward and I would still find fulfillment and meaning in my life. Like, I don't know, Omar, those parallels are like starkly apparent to me when I think about that conversation we had with Mike T.
So this is the great circle right here, because Trex and myself had that episode and we spoke about accepting, like from my perspective of when I had the thing with, we've all been lifting for a long period of time. So I don't think anyone who's been lifting for a long period of time hasn't had some sort of permutation of these conversations. And one of the things that, riffing off of what I think Trex said, is I accepted the death of an aspect of myself. And then I think I brought it up, or we spoke about it with, Mike T. So we've all been lifting for over a decade. So I think we're noticing patterns here, because we have to have these tricky conversations where essentially things aren't going our way. The expected outcome of what we're endeavoring to do is not being produced. So how do then we either change the course of action of what we're doing, but then wait a second, it's not actually changing the outcome once again. Well, what does that mean? And so I do want to throw back Helms. Absolutely, man. Echo, I think both of you brought up some great points. I think there's something, that's why I was nodding to what Trexler was saying about not being confident, not that he's confident that he'll get back to that same level, and it's not just a general acceptance of, it's all good, man. Either which way, it doesn't really matter. We're just here. We're just lifting. It's fun. But I think there's been a genuine Trex level of introspection over time, both maybe for yourself as a person, and then also as that relates to being a lifter. And one of the things I will just note that I'm so glad that you found lifting at the tender age of 12. Otherwise, who knows what Trex could have become, folks. A hoodlum, a ruffian, a ne'er-do-well. Like, is it safe to say, just real quick, because I don't want to miss out on that, Trex, do you think that if you weren't saved by lifting at the tender age of 12, that you would have been one of those things potentially?
Actually, you know what I would have been?
What?
There's no doubt about it. I would have been a total band nerd.
Nice.
I'm certain of it. Because there actually was a point where I was kind of singled out as being, having a high level of aptitude as a percussionist. And I reached a fork in the road where they basically said, at my high school, the band program took itself very, very seriously, and they said, listen, if you want to, do what it takes, in the fall, you do marching band. In the winter, you do drumline, and then all throughout the year, you do concert band. And it was basically, would you rather, as a 14-year-old kid in Ohio, play football and wrestle, or do percussion all year round. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go with football and wrestle, you know? So there's no question that without lifting, I would have been, you know, basically my life would have been that series of Drumline movies with, was it Nick Cannon?
Yeah.
How'd that turn out for them? That's where I would be.
Hey, can I point out, he brought up, that wasn't even just him using a
pop culture reference. We're seeing an
he
update.
Brought it out.
Yeah, I'm killing it today.
No, yeah.
But
yeah.
Omar, I did want to make a bit of an analogy that I think kind of solidifies where I'm at. Because like you said, it's not that I have become like nihilistic, like whatever, man, I don't even care what happens. You know, I'm still rooting for me. I'm fully vested in being a big me guy. I hope things go well in whatever form that takes. But if I'm going to have to do it, folks, I know I don't have the meditation bowls behind me, but there's a metaphor in Buddhism where they talk about, many writers have talked about not, you know, you're going through a really chaotic river, you know, the water's all crazy, just raging river getting tossed around. And the goal with Buddhism is not to somehow make the river calmer, it's to build a boat that is sufficient to get you safely to the other side. It's about focusing on what you can do with yourself to kind of stabilize through turbulence, not to just hope that turbulence will never happen again. So for me, the reason that I move forward with uncertainty, but still this vague level of confidence is because I've gotten to a point in life where I feel good about the boat. I feel like wherever we're heading, I'll be able to figure something out. I have so far in life. And now that I'm in my 4th decade of life, I feel like I should at this point be confident that as we keep moving forward, we'll be able to figure something out. And, you know, we'll see what the next crazy injury is after I come back from this one, start lifting like a jackass again and find a way to mess something else up. That's the game, you know? And I do want to say, for people who are, I didn't really talk about the etiology of this injury, and it is a bit of a mystery to some extent. But as we get closer to what I think there's like a pretty confident diagnosis now with that nerve entrapment. The most likely scenario is that this actually goes back to when I was wrestling. So wrestling is essentially kind of it's an asymmetrical sport. You either wrestle with your right foot forward or your left foot forward. Or if you're a freak of nature and you can do both interchangeably, good for you. But, you know, that's kind of like being someone who can pitch with their right hand and left hand. That's an exaggeration, but you get the idea. It's like being a good switch hitter. It's not unheard of, but it's not the norm. So, you know, I used to wrestle like crazy. I was insanely passionate about wrestling. My mother hated it because I would push myself to an extent that made my mother very concerned about me. But anyway, I would just wrestle. And I'm in this, you know, lopsided kind of asymmetrical stance for so long. And I started to develop a sacrum issue and, you know, kept wrestling through it, eventually tore my sacroiliac ligament, which is not commonly torn, but it's the ligament that basically keeps your sacrum, the base of your spine, kind of nestled tightly in your, you know, in your pelvis without any kind of rotation. Well, when you tear that, now you got this spine that likes to kind of twist around a little bit. Tremendously painful, a lot of nerves that kind of run through the area. So most likely what we're seeing here is someone who developed a sacrum issue, wrestled through it, because when it happened and I tore the SI ligament, they said, would you like to stop wrestling or should we jam this needle into your SI ligament and inject you full of anti-inflammatory steroids? And I said, oh, the second one sounds fine. So they basically gave me the maximum frequency of these corticosteroid injections just to kind of limp me through the end of my wrestling career. And it seemed like a great idea at the time. It sure did. But basically, you know, you got a bad sacrum issue, you wrestle through it, and then you go right into powerlifting. What could go wrong, Omar?
Just the best possible outcome. I can't believe these revelations. Trex, I have a few more questions for you, and then Helms, I want to dip it back over to you. But we just revealed that Trex did steroids, quote unquote steroids, but steroids, and that Helms is waiting for a supplement sponsor. It may or may not be BCAAs that saved his, issue with his hips. To be determined. It's a little murky. We're figuring out just how to best tell the story. Let's put it that way. But I do want to get back to this because there is something absolutely here at Trex. And I do really enjoy your perspective on this, where you said you developed some soft skills over the last 7 years, maybe related to, and that's why I didn't want to put words in your mouth, man, where I said about like the passion for lifting and like how it sort of changed. One of the things, Helms, where you're away for a minute, that I do want to second as an example that you just explained about 20 minutes ago. It's related maybe to not the soft skills, but the introspection of like, what do I enjoy about lifting? And you're like, have I lost my passion for lifting? Where you're like, no, I've never liked this kind of training modality I'm currently doing. I want to get back to doing A. A is the thing I enjoy doing. I currently can only do B. I don't enjoy B. And it's okay that I don't enjoy B because I like doing A. And I'll just say that a little bit when it related to kind of the elbow and some of the different variations of things I was doing, or the training intensity for me, it's the act of trying to perform at my best. And the way I even conceptualize lifting for myself now is that I'm going through the hypertrophy phase and so on and so forth. I do think you have to be tethered to a greater cause. And for me, it's the possibility of displaying another level of excellence to myself and for myself at some other level, of putting myself essentially through a gauntlet, through a journey where there potentially could be that end outcome. There could also not be that end outcome of achieving a different level. But I will do then, Trex, the lifting, the building of the muscle, because it's all now tethered to that greater goal. So I'm motivated to go forward with that. Other people, on YouTube, I'm joking, when they talk about goals, it could be related like looks maxing, bro. Like, you lift because guess what? Trex, I don't know if you're aware of this, but every single inch you put on your bicep will equal about a 20 to 30% increased success in various dating apps. So it's like different ways that we tether what we do to an outcome. But anyways, I want to hear about these soft skills, man, because you just explained for yourself that it's not apathy, it's not nihilism that you're dealing with, where you said it's all good any which way. And to give Helms contribute a little bit, I'll just say quickly for myself, I completely agree with that it's not apathy or nihilism, even for myself, when I say like, oh, it's any which way, whatever happens, whether I get back to the previous peak I had, surpass it, or I never managed to get to that, it's okay. And I'd say from my perspective, there are many different things that could occur in life that you'll try your best or you'll put forth 100% effort, and it just will not happen due to a wide variety of different circumstances, right? They're outside of your control. What you can control is within your sphere of influence, and then whatever happens, you have to be okay with any of those various possibilities. And so it's things outside of sort of lifting that gave then that perspective to myself. And so I think it was interesting for yourself where you're bringing up this, some like for Buddhism, let's say, like maybe how that influenced your way of thinking as it relates to lifting. I find that interesting. But talk to us, man, now about developing some of these soft skills. Like, what did that journey look like for yourself? Where almost, let's say there was maybe and I want you to explain this, like almost like not a decentering of yourself, but as you realize, like, okay, it's about my journey, but also if it doesn't happen, it's okay. There's more than just myself that's doing this thing. I've now been lifting for a long period of time, but this lifting has allowed me to understand other people. Wait, this is a new thing I'm going through. How does that impact other people as well? Like, what are some of these soft skills? How did you start developing it? What were some of those conversations where you gave one example where you said, hey, like, am I losing passion for lifting? And it's like, well, no, I just enjoy doing once again this, and I can't do this anymore. So just walk us through some of these conversations, these internal dialogues maybe you had, and what some of these new soft skills you feel look like.
Yeah, I think I've always had pretty good soft skills as a coach. I've always felt that one of my strengths as a coach was being able to really effectively communicate with people. But I do think that this whole experience has helped me experience firsthand things that I've never had to deal with, and these are common challenges that a lot of clients face. My past clients, and when I get the old shop up and running again, my future clients are going to have these very same issues, and that's issues of motivation. Because it was really weird for me. I was always the person who, my biggest issue was I would not want to take days off from the gym. So I would, mess up my training splits because I would be in the gym on my off day, and, it was a chore to try to stay out of the gym. And once your training has been modified to an extent that you just don't want to do it, you just think it's boring, and you aren't really all that interested in the results it's going to bring you anyway, because it's such a watered down version of training. I think it was really interesting to experience a motivation as it pertains to training for the first time in my life. And I think experiencing that, it really helps me understand better how to help folks with that in the future. Because if you would have asked me a long time ago, I might have said, oh, well, we just need to remember why it's important to us and why we're doing it. And we got to tap into some of that grit, or some of that, put in whatever cliche you want to put in there, right? Willpower, throw some of that in there. Nowadays, I'm more of the opinion that a really good coach figures out where are you trying to get and why, because that's important. And how are we able to get you as close to that as possible while having you do things that you're passionate about doing, things that you enjoy doing, right? Because that, there's so many folks, I never understand this, folks that they're like a bodybuilder and they do bodybuilder training and they act like it's like the biggest chore, and it's like, I'm going to war today. And it's like, dude, training is your favorite part of the day and you know it. I don't understand why you're complaining online about doing your favorite thing and kind of acting like it's this huge sacrifice. So anyway, I think experiencing a lack of motivation for training and digging into why I wasn't motivation, and it gets back to just a huge mismatch between what I like to do, what I'm hoping to achieve, and what this type of training looks like and would bring me. To me, that was really, really illuminating. Another thing I experienced while all this stuff was going on was, I used to say all the time when I would do podcasts about metabolic adaptation years and years ago, when I wanted to lose weight, I just did. And when I wanted to gain weight, I just did. It was not difficult for me. It's always come easy, relatively speaking. If I wanted to got to college and when I wanted to add 50 pounds, I just did. And that's as a short guy, 5'7". And then when I wanted to drop down from 195 to the mid 130s, I just did. Nope, not a big deal. But in recent years, I started taking a medication where a known side effect is increasing appetite and desire to eat. And for the first time in my life, I was like, whoa, if I'm not really conscious about my physical activity and my diet habits, I am for the first time in my life in a position where I will be passively gaining fat mass at a pretty rapid clip. And with no confidence about where that end is going to be. Like, because I have known my body well enough to know for the entirety of my life, I'll just eat to contentment. And once I get to a certain body fat level, I know my appetite is going to shut off. Like I know exactly what my range is for if I get this lean, I start to be hungry. If I gain enough fat to get up to here, my appetite shuts off, and that's kind of my range. But that's been completely recalibrated, which has challenged, I wouldn't say challenge, but it's been very illuminating for some of my understanding of like the academic elements of obesity and kind of the etiology of obesity. But it's also given me a lot more empathy for my clients who have struggled with weight management, and it's just something I'd never had a personal challenge with. I know I'm not an idiot in all ways. I can look at the literature and recognize, okay, here's what people report as barriers. Here's the success rates when it comes to weight management. I mean, I could piece it together and understand that it was hard and not hold on to any ridiculous, oversimplified perspectives like, oh, it's just willpower. It's clearly not. But nonetheless, yeah, it's been an interesting. I think those are probably the two biggest areas where I've been able to really bolster my empathy by going through experiences that, to be honest, I could live without them. I'd love to still be training and having my very, very tight control over how I want to regulate my body weight and body fat and things like that. Doing it while being very comfortable and not having a mismatch between my appetite and my energy balance needs. But nonetheless, I choose to emphasize the bright side and say, wow, I've learned a lot from that, and it'll probably make me more helpful over the course of my lifespan, and more helpful with my research, more helpful with my coaching. So, take the good with the bad and, figure it out as we go.
Trex, so many nuggets right there. I will hop it over to Helms because this is a conversation about the Erics, but thank you for that. I think you've done a great job kind of at the end of that episode, you hinted at some of these things and now you've been explaining yourself, your journey. I think people have gained a newfound appreciation for your perspective. Helms, we're about a LARP, okay? We're going to do something you're going to enjoy because, how would I put this? Trex has been dealing with this particular issue for about 7 years. That's a really long time to have these conversations. And there's been probably numerous points, and I could say I haven't had something happen to me quite for that length, but I spoke before about accepting the death of a potential aspect of myself and genuinely being okay with it, just because it was like the time course of what it seemed like what was going to happen, so on and so forth. You mentioned, and I could say conclusively, I think from knowing myself enough, being able to audit like kind of my emotions, my feelings, like how my perspective would change, evolve, or revolve over time, that I'd be okay with it. You said the brink. You mentioned that there's a chasm or a canyon for Trex that he now potentially, like, what's going to happen? There's unknown, right? So we're dealing, one of the fundamental aspects of this conversation, how does one deal with unknowns, right? And the unknown potentially, even though you're making all the best choices you can, given your scenario, like Trex right now has consulted a lot of different doctors, a lot of medical professionals, very knowledgeable person. So he's making all the best choices he can to get the outcome he wants, but he may or may not get then that outcome. And how would that change things? You spoke about, so with both the neck and then with the hip, so you got hip surgery as an example, that was a positive outcome. Then when it related to your neck, the neck more or less, like many other factors, but resolved itself or to a point where you could train once again, not going to kind of flirt with weightlifting right now, but it kind of resolved. So you've had these positive outcomes from potentially being at the brink, but have you thought about for yourself, or are we about a live action role play right now for Helms? What if it doesn't all happen? What if this exceptionalism doesn't occur? Not knock on wood. I don't want to let's not wish this upon anyone, man. But how do you think, if anything, your perspective would change? Because I think what I'm hearing from Trex, it's just a difference, I think, in length of time in the journey and a few other things, is that he's had to have these conversations. It's been going on such a long period of time. And really now he's almost at the point, again, not trying to put words in Trex's mouth, but it's like, it's either maybe going to be a surgical intervention or nothing, and then this would be the new normal for him, how he would exist. So he's had to have these conversations, and they're very real in terms of the future. For yourself, man, how do you think that you would react? Let's say it could be the neck issue or you as a lifter, because right now you've obtained a higher level. You've said in a previous episode as an example, like kind of, not that you're more motivated than ever before, but your physique is continuing to improve, the external part of that. And it's hard, once again, I'm going to kick it over to you, man, to answer these things without going through it. I think you have to go through the crucible to understand exactly how one would feel. It's a hypothetical situation for all of us that are not currently in it. So got to keep all of that in mind. But if you could not do what you do at the level that you wish to do it, so that's kind of like the negative outcome, right? How would that change your relationship with lifting? Do you think it'd be something, maybe, again, not trying to answer the question for you, but like where you become more kind of community oriented? So the idea, like Trex just mentioned, the idea that it's almost a decentering of himself, where then he could have more empathy for other people. And then also he feels it'll make him a better coach, right? So that's a positive aspect, regardless of what happens. That's something that has evolved within him. What do you think would happen with yourself, man? Because you've dealt with something kind of similar, but like I said, when you're about to be, it's like a Dostoevsky style. He's about to be executed. Then there's this day of execution. Well, now his life's changed. Now, hey, now we're writing novels. Now we're reflecting on things. Everything's good. But it's like, what if you go down option B? How do you think that would change things?
Trex started lifting at 12. I started reading fantasy, playing role-playing games, which I love that you said LARP.
Yeah.
And having an imaginary world that I lived in from a very, very young age. And that was largely because I didn't really initially, it took me a while to learn how to play well with others. Let's just put it that way. I spent a lot of time in a kind of being like an outcast as a young kid, and, you know, reading sci-fi fantasy books and buying like tabletop role-playing game stuff, and then not having anyone to play it with. So just kind of creating it in my mind. And it wasn't until I joined a summer camp where, like, what you did in the day, it was like a day summer camp, was play this role-playing game with a bunch of other mostly outcast type kids, you know, where I really felt a sense of purpose, belonging, community, and the ability to express myself, not just by myself. But I will say I got pretty good at expressing myself and feeling comfortable alone. And what those themes have always been, and this is something I've reflected on a lot, is I find meaning of being on a quest, you know? And if I was in a position where I couldn't lift and there was a massive change, I would need to find a new quest. I would find a new quest. And that's something I have as, I mean, it motivates me, it excites me, it gives me a sense of purpose like nothing else. And a lot of things can take that form. And that's how I do the things that I love in society as well. So I did, like, for example, when I finished my career in the Air Force, which very quickly I realized, oh man, this whole pathway that I'm going, this trajectory, is not really what I wanted to do. It didn't turn out the way I thought it would. It's not really who I am or who I want to be, or it doesn't align with my values. And my brief, you know, stint of trying to make it in hip hop and music became non-viable. I had these deaths. Like, okay, what am I going to do? Who am I? How do I find meaning? How do I make a living, when it really comes down to it as well? And then what's my contribution? What's my quest? And lifting became that. And then a bunch of octopus arms of other quests came off of it. So my quest in my career, I guess you could say, is trying to make the thing that gave me so much, lifting, a better space for everyone, and to increase the probability that other people get positive things from it. And for me, that community is like, you know, the serious lifting crew, and many competitive bodybuilders and powerlifters I see as like my people, competitive strength and physique athletes. So that wouldn't go away even if I was completely, let's say, unable to function physically. I mean, there are things that could happen that could prevent me from cognitively contributing in that way, and I'd try to still find a way. Yeah. And I guess you can think of, depends on how stoic you want to get. You can think of like, so what if I was conscious but unable to speak or move? How would I live in that scenario? I don't know how productive it is to go through every single permutation of how bad that canyon or cliff is, but I've definitely thought about, what if I couldn't do what I'm doing as a lifter? And I'm very confident in a similar way to Trex, is that I would find some way to find meaning and to contribute. One of the quests that I finished that did give me a sense of like melancholy, mild depression afterwards, and was finishing my PhD, because it was like my WNBF Pro card. There's the point at which you get to in a PhD where you do see a light at the end of the tunnel is down the track a bit for most people. And you live with, for years, going, theoretically, this is possible. I think I'm the type of person who can do this, but I have no data to convince me that I'm actually going to complete this PhD. But people around me are, and I'm at least as smart as them, or at least as capable as them, so we're just going to keep taking steps forward. And then you get to a point where there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and you're like, oh shit, I can say what I need to do to complete my PhD, and it doesn't seem, and you don't say it like, oh, well, supposedly I'm going to do X, Y, and Z to finish my PhD. Like, you know, I need to do X, Y, and Z to finish my PhD. And as someone who's now supervised a bunch of PhD students, and many of them to completion, you can hear that change in their voice and their perspective when they get to that point. It's like, yeah, I guess supposedly I'm going to publish X, Y, and Z, defend, present at these conferences, collect data on 30 people. And then they're like, yeah, I've got 3 more data collection sessions left. I'm going to, and I got the defense coming up. And once I got to the end of that tunnel, there was definitely a period of like, oh, wow, I finished a doctorate. I didn't know that I was going to get that done. I have that done, but now what? And I think in our society, we emphasize the accomplishment or the destination far too much. And we forget that, like, it feels good to win a pro card. It feels good to walk the stage when you get your PhD. It feels good to do all of those things that are those milestone, ritualized achievement moments of like, you did it. But the hard truth to hear is that they don't provide nearly the kind of satisfaction that the act of striving for that goal does. Being on the quest is infinitely more satisfying because it is the process of doing it than actually getting there. And when people frame it as, I'm doing all this hard shit and that I otherwise maybe don't want to do or that I want to complain about, just so I can get that outcome, there's fewer things that I see as more tragic, to be honest. Because you're missing out on so much gold. And obviously, that's built into 3D Muscle Journey, and it's a perspective I have for sport, but it is a perspective I have for life too. So for me, the thing that was really important and that has given me a ton of fulfillment and personal growth has been to like make sure that ladder's down and that I'm paying it forward and I'm passing the torch on. And it is so fulfilling for me to give other people in a position where I was 10, 15 years ago who have not this exact same, but similar values, the opportunity and the mentorship to try to help them do that, and to communicate those same things so they can make that transition more effectively and we can make the space better. So giving back is a big part of it, Omar, but there's also the narcissistic part of me that just likes to be on the quest. Like, I want to be the hero in my own story. And I think that I am aware of, I've accepted about myself, and I'm very intentional, to go back to Mike T's episode. Like, he wants to keep doing the thing. And I want to find a way to make myself the hero of my own story. And with eyes wide open, because that can be a very dangerous thing. One thing I was reflecting on was that there are some people who go through really challenging things in lives and it fundamentally changes who they are and they become a better person for it as part of their evolution. And there's other people, and maybe they haven't really gone through it, but it makes them shittier, And I don't just mean like it makes them more cynical, but the people who use the things they've gone through to elevate themselves into a state of superiority and who will say like, I have no empathy for you because I made it through that. Why can't you?
Yeah.
And that to me is like the antithesis of growth or the purpose of these things, right? Like, I think it's a tremendous statement about Trex's character that through going through hard things and overcoming it, it's made him more empathetic, not less. Because there's a lot of people in our space who again, supposedly are going through these challenging things. At least they convince themselves of it. And it seems to make them less empathetic. It seems to just be a weaponized vehicle of judgment so that they can bolster their own belief about, I do it right, I'm perfect, I'm better than other people, and if you can't figure it out, that shit's on you. And I really hate that. And it's the reason I hate it, because it's a strong word, is it's such a missed opportunity, and it is such an unproductive way of viewing self and the world that actually closes you off to growth and prevents you from helping other people with your experiences. So that's what I think.
Helms. Very well said, man. So what you're saying, they're like Isildur. They have to cast it into the fire of the ring. They have this opportunity. They've been on this remarkable journey. There's just one act in order to have that, transformation, almost even a transfiguration into something better. And at the last moment, I was like, you know what? Yeah, I am the shit. Like I did. I'm better than no. In fact, I'm better than you. No, I think that's very truthful. I think exactly what you described about yourself, Helms. I do think that's accurate. I think you know yourself for sure well enough. And I think that just speaks, and that's part of what Trex kind of the hope within this episode is that there's that hidden amount of people, I think, and it's not, I don't think it's an age thing. Look, 12, 21, when you both of you respectively start lifting, or an amount of time even. Like you only a decade in this game. At a certain point, you start having these revelations, because I can say, and that's why we don't hear from them as much. I know some people, even the people a decade, let's say, younger than us, so they're in their 20s and they're like mid-20s, like whatever the case might be, and they're having maybe some of these questions. So I'll give you a parallel example. They could be a competitive lifter, but maybe like lifting is not producing that desired outcome where they've, been at the top, or they've competed at a high level, or maybe, they're at a certain point where things are changing and they don't know how to reevaluate those things. And there is a contingent of people bringing it up, which is why I think it's cool. Both of you, you're still in the game, and kind of to your point, Helms, where we gave like the worst case scenario, man. Worst case mean not like, I have no mouth and I must scream. But like, I can't lift, I can't be a pro, like, or I can't compete at that level. But what would you do? So you still be involved in some capacity and you do something that's fulfilling. I think it's important to have these conversations with both of you to give perhaps a perspective, a different perspective for people who have, they'd identify with various components of either of your journeys, and maybe they've felt some of those things. And this isn't, look, we talk about the Kool-Aid at Iron Culture, like, if there's one thing we believe in, is the lifelong lifter. But I want to state, not that this is going to be controversial here, Helms, that it's okay for yourself if, like, really you've made that evaluation and that lifting is just not going to be a part of your life, that you don't find it facilitates any other aspect, that you find the meaning that you previously derived. Like, it's okay. So we're not trying to, like, have everyone drink the Kool-Aid. Like, no, stay in this game. There's always something here. But I think having these tough, honest, ever-changing conversations are an important part of the journey. I think what you said, Eric, about like reframing kind of the quest, and then for yourself, Trex, talking kind of about your perspective shift, knowing that these could be potential outcomes and how would one adjust, has been fantastic. I do want to kick it over to you, though, Trex, because I think we've heard, myself and Helms, kind of like our journey more. And as the still new, it's not been quite a year, co-host of Iron Culture, there's a whole bunch of Trex-lore that hasn't been uncovered. So I'm just wondering, man, I want to give you the floor, maybe before we kind of wrap it up, where you've explained a lot about yourself, a lot about your way of thinking that I think is very valuable to this space. Is there anything you kind of want to circle back to, expand upon, or it's like, Omar, I did not say that shit. Like, don't quote me as such. Like, anything you want to go back to?
Well, the one thing that I will acknowledge is, like, I do still think there is value in being a lifelong lifter, unless you are literally physically precluded from doing so. And the reason I say that has a lot more to do with healthy aging and wellness in old age, rather than being part of the culture, you know, or being as jacked as you can. And I think for me, one of the reasons that I'm able to kind of approach the future with so much contentment and calmness is, first of all, because my life rocks. I like what I do every day. Found a wife who I very much enjoy. Life's good. So I can't pretend that it's a tragedy that I have nerve entrapment. Like, give me a break. I'm doing okay. But also, I know that, for me to be a lifelong lifter, if I'm looking at the medical literature and saying, what do I need to do to make that happen? I basically need to carve out about 40 to 60 minutes a week doing some stuff that doesn't really excite me. I can take that medicine. I'll be okay, right? But I think for me, what I'm very hopeful about is that I'll find a way to engage with lifting once I'm on the other side of this injury, where it's not just kind of pinching your nose and taking the medicine and doing your 40 to 60 minutes a week, which really gets you the lion's share of the health benefit of lifting. I am hopeful that I'll get back to that point where I'd rather do it 40 to 60 minutes a day. And it's the type of thing where I go to the gym and I'm excited, and the gym is an area where I am excelling and thriving, and perhaps there's a nice little gym culture where, there's folks that I like to keep up to date with. How's your training going? Mine's going well too. There's so much there are so many nice things that lifting can offer when you're really thriving in your lifting that goes above and beyond just the kind of clinical benefit of being a lifelong lifter. So I would encourage people, to the extent that it's feasible and possible, to commit, if you can, to being a lifelong lifter for your own sake, even if that means doing pistol squats from a chair in your house and getting out the old resistance bands, because if you do that 40 to 60 minutes a week, you're probably going to be much happier and healthier in your 80s if you're lucky enough to make it there, than if you say, well, I guess I can't be a professional bodybuilder and I can't go compete at the national level in powerlifting, so screw this, I'm out. You know, I hope that people will be able to kind of see how Helms views this stuff, how Omar, how you and I view this stuff, and say, okay, if I am a lifelong lifter, what is my best case scenario for what that looks like? But also, what's the entire distribution or spectrum of scenarios for what that looks like? And I hope that people, again, just for their own health and well-being, will find somewhere on that spectrum where lifting plays the correct role in their life, you know, in accordance with their goals and their priorities and their ability level at any given time. And so for me, right now, like I said, one of the things that helps me stay content and optimistic without clinging to any particular outcome is my lifting right now is not great, but life is good, and that's great. And I'm going to continue being interested in fitness, whether that's at an academic level, via coaching, hopefully, you know, by getting back in the trenches myself in a meaningful way. You know, it's not like I never train anymore, but Omar, it just ain't the same, right? And so I'd like to get back to something that is at least reminiscent of the good old days when I would sneak into that gym on campus that I don't think my undergraduate college knew about, to lift at 2 a.m. completely alone, where one time I did pin myself with a bench press, which was quite another tale for another day. Nothing interesting. That's the whole tale. But anyway, back in my rambunctious youth, when lifting was like the highlight of my day, I just, you know, I would love to be able to get back to something approximating that. But I'm going to do my best and be comfortable with all outcomes.
Trexler, I've loved this conversation. And Helms, let me just say, this is why Trex is the co-host, why it's a holy trifecta here. Because we said, Helms, we're like, yeah, we talk about being a lifelong lifter. We got the Kool-Aid right here. You don't have to drink it. We're like, wait, but you like, you know, like any good salesperson, you don't have to drink this. Like, if anything, you could quit anytime you like. And Trex was like, yeah, no, that is true. However, this Kool-Aid that you see right here is the best, most satisfying Kool-Aid you've ever had in your life. In fact, I would say it's a necessity in order to prolong your life. So he came right back there. There's the journey. And I do think this is important, though, Helms, and I want you to give your closing thoughts, man. Just because, so for both of you, like you said, Helms, you started lifting at 21. Well, by the time you kind of became a public figure, like a more notable public figure, you're kind of in your like late 20s, early 30s. Trex, same idea. For a lot of people in academia, they spend the first little bit of their lifting career, you know, kind of getting education, higher education, and then at some point after that, they really start contributing to the space. So we're missing kind of not the wonder years, but I think what people will notice in both of your journeys is just how remarkably similar it is to many other lifters' journeys. Like for Trex as an example, like the bulk of Trex contributing in the online space is kind of like 2017 and post-2017, right? After that time period. But Trex was the most serious of lifters prior to that. And so I think it's not about relatability, but it's about a deep fundamental understanding that we all have for the iron game and at various points we're on our lifting journey. And perhaps the last thing I want to say, Helms, and as now the de facto most active person on social media, Eric Helms, out of the three of us, like you've seen this though in the space. If there's one agenda, man, in this episode, it was just So the conversation that we've had, the evolution of kind of some of the pain science and some of the things that people have discussed as it trickles down to influencers and general communicators is like, don't catastrophize things. Your body's far more resilient than it is, which is like all check mark, all these things. Yes. Right. And like, you don't like what is optimal form? Like, does that thing even exist? Like, ooh, you're backgrounded a little bit, like all like, the either short reels we've seen or the topics. Yes. Those are all invaluable because we don't want to catastrophize these things. But not that this conversation, Helms, was but then what if you're not able to return to normal? Or what if things aren't resolving itself? Like the trickier conversations, right? Because I think we bake into our content things that we can make into content, right? So the idea, like, here is the truth claimed, right? Like, you are fragile, right? And then it's like, well, you're actually not fragile. That's a much easier conversation to have in a 60 or 90-second reel than what Helms just explained about his journey, or Trex about himself. It's like, well, okay, well, let's walk down the path that everything that you should, both of you. You're both seeking this like through as Helms. I'm really glad you said that. And I'll say about the same thing for myself about how some of my injuries have resolved. It's not just like, my due diligence and me being active about it and having the privilege and the opportunity to be connected to so many people that are knowledgeable and so on and so forth. It's like sometimes it's also just luck. As having these trickier conversations, Helms, of like, but what if it doesn't get better? I think is invaluable to the lifter. So yeah, man, I want to hear from you, Helms. Great insight. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, actually, related to what you just said about being the most active person on social media and the way it comes across and things being made into content. When I first competed in bodybuilding and I got on stage, I remember immediately after getting off stage for my first competition, I was like, oh my God, I love this. The idea of me working and like to build something and achieve something, and maybe one day I can be like a champion in this sport. It filled me with such excitement, and that whole quest part of me, it just like, and I was hooked. And that was largely occurring in the dark, and it was almost like, oh, maybe through that I can get, acknowledgement, recognition from my peers. I can have that rocky moment of being held up, like, I did it, kind of thing. And it's a funny thing now to be actually getting to live that thing that I did. I'm like, I'm trying to go compete at Worlds and move up the ranks in 2025. And this month, probably within a few days of right now, I don't know the exact day, is my 20-year anniversary of lifting. And I have a very different perspective now than I had in 2007. And in some ways, it's kind of hard because like I have Believe 2024, our 3DMJ YouTube channel log that's on episode 10 of me going through this, finally getting to live that dream that I set forth 2007, or like the culmination of it, because that was part of the whole time has been part of it. Don't get me wrong. But I don't get to do it in that pure sense that I actually was doing it back then. People ask me questions because I'm Eric Helms, the chief science officer of 3DMJ now. I have to justify why I decided to increase my volume. I don't want to get hurt in front of other people because maybe it'll hurt our brand. Like these thoughts go through my head, and I've made the conscious decision of like, listen, I'm just going to be Eric the athlete in these videos and put it out there and just be myself. I can't be fake. I'm not, I can't. So I'm just going to do it. But there is this extra little barrier. It's like, and I'm making content, and that's good for the business, but I don't want it to be performative. I actually just want to share this athletic experience. So there's complexity to it now that I don't think I actually could have handled when I was 24 or 25. That now at 41, with 20 years of lifting and having a much stronger understanding of why, and having been on those brinks, I know where those lines are. I know who I am. I know what I want to get out, and I want to. There's a difference between being transparent and sharing everything versus being dishonest and guarding certain parts. And I know what all that looks like, and I'm kind of glad that it did take this long to get here. But at the same time, it does require a lot more like awareness and cognitive thought. And I do enjoy just being in the gym and training, but to some degree as well, the destination is not even going to be what you expect it to be. I think that's an important lesson. So you better damn well enjoy the journey. And the journey is what's going to build who you are to be able to handle whatever comes or whatever version of that destination will be. So I think just really enjoy whatever it is you're enjoying right now. And because there is only now in some ways. So don't live in tomorrow, and definitely don't be Al Bundy living in yesterday, I guess is the final closing thoughts I have.
And that pastime paradise. Helms, that might be the Helms nugget right there. The destination will not be what it will be when you arrive at it. Like that I think that encapsulates it. There's so much here. I have thoroughly enjoyed this episode. Everyone in the comment section, I expect to see monster episode. And I do enjoy, we all take a look time to time permitted, at some of the comments on the YouTube, like where people, you could share, like Eric, you share aspects of yourself, like with pro bodybuilder, like people dropped in comments, same idea with Trex. So I do like how it's one directional, right? So it's top down. We do not respond to comments. We read it and then we internally process it and then we choose to discuss it. But in all seriousness, it is fantastic to have a community to bounce these ideas off of, to share them. And I do think that these perspectives, like I said before, are invaluable. And so I just want to thank both of you for being on another episode of Iron Culture. They could go ahead and leave a rating review on iTunes. It does seem to help us out. 5 stars is typically what people leave. Please be kind on the Erics and the not Erics. Just because, sometimes there's confusion where some comments are being left, like, who are you referring to specifically? But what would it entail if it is the person that is not the intended person who's then interpreting it, and then they feel some sort of way, and then they're under this assumption that people feel this thing about them, and then now they're living this lie, but they don't even know they're living this lie. It can get pretty complex, but go ahead and leave a rating and review on iTunes. We're back every single insert date here from now until the end of time. We'll catch you in that next episode.